some typical examples of damp and mould. Some obvious and some not so obvious. Now I'll see if I can try and cover everything. So starting at the top with a chimney pot. If you have an old house that has had all the fireplaces blocked up and you've just got central heating, then if this chimney pot is open, it'll be letting moisture in when it rains. If you've got gas fires on the walls, again, it'll just be coming down. Usually when they fit gas fires, they would change this pot. They either drop the stack and just have a vent, or they change the actual pot on the top, more of a T shape. So then if you do have fires, then the pointing around where the pot sits on the stack, then pointing on the stack itself, if that's letting water in, it can be coming down inside into the rooms. Then leading around, that could have failed, that could be out the brickwork. Then ridge tiles, that could be an area. And then slates missing, cracked slates. So then coming on to general brickwork on the exterior, you'll have the pointing or rendering. So some of the pointing may have failed, which could be letting water in. Then also the dry verge, if that's cracked and missing, can be letting water in. So then if you do have an aerial, then the wire that comes down, the coaxial, if that just runs straight down into the wall, that again can feed water in. Any wire should have a return on the bottom and then fed in, so any water will run off. Also, windows and sills. Around the window frame, if it's not sealed correctly, you can have water coming in. You may have a lintel above. If it's a steel lintel, then that could be blowing and that could be cracking the brickwork. You can get water coming in there. Around the sill, if there's any sealant missing from around the bottom of the window, again, the pointing underneath, if it's a sandstone sill. Then doors. Again, sealant around the edges. You may have a sandstone step at the bottom. You'll have a threshold. If that threshold's not sealed correctly, you can have moisture coming in through there. Again, lintels above the door, you could have cracks. There may be a soil pipe on the side of the house, which then feeds into your toilet, running into your bathroom. It may look sealed from outside and it may look sealed from inside, but you have a cavity. So where that pipe runs through, plasterwork might look okay this side as in sealed, but this brickwork may be gaping. So you've got air moving through the cavity and creating mould around your soil pipe or waste pipe. Also, the air in here will be quite cold. On stormy days, you'll see the water in the bottom of the toilet rising and dropping. So again, you've got cold air being introduced onto this wall. Depending on the shape of the roof, you may have a valley. So these can get blocked. Also, if it's lead, the lead can be split, it can fail. Again, on the other angle, you'll have hip tiles. They could be damaged. When it comes to the cavity, looking through the cavity, I've got the ties and I've got the damp course down here. Then the idea of this cavity is to stop moisture breaching the inner wall. So typically on old houses, the brick ties, they could be breached with debris over the years. Also, this damp course sits down here. If this is breached from outside, then that will cause a problem. Internally, just the same, debris can be falling. So, yeah, anything breaching can cause damp coming through. Then the actual floor itself, if it's a solid floor, then the asphalt in there, the moisture barrier could be damaged and you could be getting moisture coming through, which would create extra damp within the house, condensation. And when it comes to guttering, years ago, before they were using guttering, they would have just extended the roof. The eaves under here would have protected the house. Then over time, they would have added a bracket, well, a board, a bracket, and then the gutter. So it would look a bit like this. From the ends of the noggins would be sat. And then I have seen them with just a bracket on each one, with the gutter running along. But then they are also boarded. They just put a board on, fascia board, and run the gutter on that. But then over time, things changed a bit, and that fascia then became underneath a soffit board to prevent painting all of this underneath. Just made it easier. A lot of modern houses, it is literally just the fascia board now and your gutter. Victorian houses, they were slightly different. So they would have had the brickwork sat like this and the roof line and a wooden gutter sat on top. And when they rot, they can create moisture coming through. But also, when this rots, usually they get replaced, the guttering gets replaced. So you would still have that bit of brickwork and a bit of fascia board goes on. If that fascia board isn't level, if it's cocking back on itself, then your gutter, instead of your gutter being level, one side is going to be higher, so it's going to be sat back on itself. So then when it rains, the level of water will come up so far, and you might not see it tipping over the front, but it will certainly be going over the back, coming inside. Can be a lot better having a soffit, because if you do have any problems with your gutters, then at least you know when you get rot in your soffit boards. It doesn't come into the house the same. Now also, another factor can be where the roof line comes down. On some older houses, you have the felt that sits underneath and should come out, sitting into the gutter. Well, this can deteriorate and eventually will disappear. So then, looking from above, if this is the end of your tile, bit crude, but if that's the edge of your tile line and you're actually looking into the gutter from above, then if this gutter is not sat all the way underneath the edge of the tile, then you can get a slight gap being created. So when you look from underneath, you'll see daylight instead of tile sitting over the gutter. So again, the water coming down the tile will drip and can blow back and end up coming into your brickwork. So overall, modern houses, you shouldn't necessarily get a lot of these issues. You may have mould around the windows because they might not be sealed internally correctly. Again, around your doors. Bathrooms can be a problem, especially when they're on external walls. Cooler areas, you're going to get condensation, humidity. Anything that's cooling down and heating up is going to be attracting the moisture when it's cooling down, and then the mould will thrive on that warmth and wet. And when I say warmth and wet, you've got the cold air blowing in, which will be cooling the surface, so the moisture in the air will sit on it and be damp. It's feeding that mould. It may dry off, but then every time there's moisture introduced to the room, you'll get a damp area. So old houses, you can insulate the walls internally by putting a thermal liner on. Before you do that, make sure that any problems, any leaks, any water coming in, any drafts are sorted out first. That way, when the insulation goes on, it will help. Now, having said it's going to help, generally cold plaster, when you put the heating on, it takes it a lot longer to warm up and it cools down a lot quicker. So when you put your thermal liner on the walls, external walls only, and maybe upper ceilings if you're not using the loft space, then the room itself, when you switch the heating on, will warm up that bit quicker and cool down a bit slower. But it's not necessarily going to heat a room up. So it's just the same principle as the interior of a fridge. The interior of a fridge will be insulated from the warmth outside, being kept cold. Alternatively, turn the fridge off, you put a heater on, and it'll keep it warm inside. So, putting any thermal liner on the walls, ensure that any problems are sorted before doing that. And then with any house, it's down to ventilation, having the correct ventilation. So some bathrooms you may have an extractor fan, which when it's not being used is blowing cold air through. You may have slats on the vent outside, but they can still move open, air can move in and out. Some vents now actually close internally, like the aperture of a camera. They'll just close up, and when switched on they open up and then start operating. So that will stop air moving back in. Again, old houses, they would have had air bricks, but then you've got cool air moving through the cavity. So then cool air moving through the cavity. Some, or a lot, has gone on in the past, and possibly still going on now, where they have the cavity filled with polystyrene beads as an insulation. But if you have any of these problems, if this exterior brickwork isn't sealed properly and you've got water coming in, then that can create a problem itself. It can take moisture from outside, which might have been coming down the wall and drying off. It then can feed it through to the wall. So again, the cavity was there to help everything breathe and dry for any moisture penetrating this first layer. Dormer bungalows. So this dormer up here, if it's got a flat roof, the felt on the flat roof can be damaged. The lead where it's joining the roof can be damaged. Any cladding on the side, if this is rotten or damaged, can be letting water in. Again, you've got lead running around the window. Anything that's split, that can be letting moisture in, creating damp and mould inside. So with this dormer, recently, well within the last 2 years, I did the staircase, and the soil pipe that runs down, connected into the bathroom, was extended. There's a bathroom fitted in here which had a toilet, so the soil pipe was then fed through the wall, through the cavity, running along the bottom of the stairs and then up into the bathroom. At the bottom of the stairs, this had been boarded out, so you couldn't see anything. It was just the ceiling came down and it was just a pipe board running across the end. But what happened, like I say, the cool air that is inside was all the way, running all the way inside the house, and this box was getting mould on it. So again, it might look sealed from outside, but that internal brickwork might have gaping holes in it, and then the plasterwork looks sealed. So just simply removed the boxing, foamed the inner wall, the gaps, put the boxing back and then foam the gap. Again, only because the cool air in the pipe was being introduced into the house. Yeah, so there can be so many variables, it's unbelievable. Even old houses that haven't got a solid floor, they'll be sat on floorboards and there's space underneath. Well, if underneath there isn't tanked, sealed, then that'll be letting moisture through into the house through the boards. Again, these old houses would have had fires burning in them, breathing, always drying out. Simply just this step, the damp course that runs around the house will sit underneath the step. So whether it's wooden or sandstone, it'll be sat on top of a damp course. With wooden ones or plastic, modern, the membrane that sits underneath, that might not be pointed underneath there. I have seen that before, where there's just a gap with the damp course just sat there. So if it's letting water in around the edge, it can be sitting on top of that membrane and just running through. Now there's a lot to consider when trying to trace a damp problem. But then when it comes to mould, overall it's stale air. You need a bit of airflow, you need some movement of air replacing the moist air that's in the house. Or simply just an incorrectly fitted threshold can create problems. If you're not cleaning the threshold out and there's no rain deflector on the door, that can gather water and you get water creeping in to the casing on either side. Again, like I say, if this threshold is not sealed down correctly, then you will have water going underneath. So when I say sealed correctly, when these are put in place, they're not just meant to be screwed down. You put the sealant on the floor or the surface first and then screw down the threshold. Even before screwing, where the screw holes are, fill them with the sealant, then put your stainless steel screws in, so any moisture that sits in the threshold won't go through those screw holes. So I recently had to replace one, but unfortunately my battery ran out, so I couldn't finish off what I was doing to show you. But we'll just have a quick look and see where the moisture was going underneath. One of the things you get asked to do, I'll put a new threshold in. This one's knackered, rubber's gone, but underneath been moisture getting through, and this just, I don't know what it is, it's not good. Either end was plugged with what's like some type of polyfiller or something. It just sat in either corner. Shocking. So that probably would have come from this side. So I'm going to clean it all up, seal it, re-drill the holes and get another threshold to go in. I've put this vacuum on to blow, so now I can speed dry these areas with the warmth of the motor and I can seal it. Then I'll start doing measuring and cutting while the sealer's going off. So it probably took about 10 minutes, that. Nice and dry now. See a little bit of moisture there. This step's flush to the floor. So vital this needs a proper threshold. Definitely. So I've got my PVA mixed up. I'll just brush this on. So that should dry fairly quickly now. Now I'll just do my measuring, cutting. Like I say, my battery ran out, so I wasn't able to show you fully, but just there you can see how easy it is for the water to get underneath, and just a small amount of moisture like that constantly coming in, you'll be getting condensation on the windows, just that extra moisture in the house that you need to dry out. And especially when it becomes winter and you're trying to dry clothes, which many people do, not everybody's got a tumble dryer, so people are drying clothes inside the house and a lot of moisture building up. So then any drafts or anything that's getting cooled down, you start to attract the mould to it. So I would like to have had the full battery, so I would have been able to show you how that was fitted, but again, like I say, as long as it's sealed when it goes down and all the edges are sealed correctly, then you shouldn't have a problem with it. Rain deflector and clean it out all the time.